I was just having a conversation with Russell Singleton off air and sharing with him that I was in a grocery store the other day and I saw a slab of bacon that was about a yard long. And now I'm not a huge bacon eater, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. I do. Occasionally on a hamburger it tastes pretty good, but I don't think I've had bacon for breakfast in years. It's 8:32, 33. Russell, of course, is here from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls. Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office, and we have better health between 8:30 and 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings, right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And Bill Colley answering the telephones for Russell this morning if people have a question or comment about this subject. This story broke a couple of weeks ago about various carcinogens in meats, and people saying, well, we should back away from eating certain, especially pork products, right? Well, hold on a second there. You know what? In my zeal to get out of the building for the holiday, I forgot to turn Russell's microphone on.
I think that's a good lead-in, but it's actually a little bit more interesting than that. The World Health Organization came out and without any real conversation, they said, or without any apology, they said that processed meat is carcinogenic. Bacon causes cancer. Sausage, ham, these things cause cancer. And then they said that red meat is probably are carcinogen. And so you get other media outlets just going to the races with this. I think I saw headlines that say bacon as bad as smoking cigarettes or processed meats the same as smoking tobacco. And that's where we're going to jump in today, because a lot of that is hype. So we're going to try and pick apart the truth from the fiction and determine really what risk processed meats really have for the development of cancer.
No, I'm not necessarily a big sausage eater either, but I bought some turkey sausage on sale a few weeks ago. It's still sitting in the freezer at home. I would imagine because that perhaps is a wider meat that would be considered better. But I also have some Portuguese sausage in the same freezer, which I assume is more of a pork sausage, which would be considered the bad one.
Well, the World Health Organization did say specifically that processed meats are carcinogenic. So what do they mean by processed meats? Well, they've clarified their own statement saying that these are things like bacon, ham, and sausage, corned beef. It's not the act of mechanically manipulating the meat, but it's the preservation of the meat. It's the smoking process, the salting process, the curing process. So even if you take a relatively healthy meat like turkey or chicken, but you salt it, smoke it, cure it, uh, process it, then certain compounds are created that can lead to genetic mutations, which can lead to cancer.
So it's a kind of a, is it a stretch? Or, I mean, because we're using some detail there that says it could happen, but I mean, is it prolonged use or is it just you eat one slice of this and you're suddenly in
Aha.
danger?
That is exactly the question I would like to answer today. If you read the news, you're going to believe that a couple of slices of bacon will cause colon cancer. And that type of thing is sensational. It sells headlines, and I don't think it's true. In fact, the World Health Organization, again, themselves said that if you eat about 50 grams of processed meat every day, so we're talking like 2 slices of bacon, but every day, your risk for developing colon cancer goes up by about 18%. Now, that statistic in and of itself is a little bit alarming, right? I mean, if someone tells you that X, Y, and Z is going to make it 20% more likely that you develop cancer, you're going to think twice about that, right? But I think even that statistic is misleading. The overall risk, or the absolute risk for an individual developing colon cancer, is about 5%. Now, that's pretty low. So how much more at risk are we for eating 2 pieces of bacon? Well, 18% more likely, right? Well, when we factor in that 5% overall risk, that really only raises our absolute risk to about 6%. So I don't think we can really say that if you develop colon cancer, it's because of the bacon, or bacon is going, or ham or whatever is going to cause you colon cancer if you eat it every day. I don't think that correlation is there.
If it was the only thing you ate, you might have an issue because you're not getting fruit, vegetables, and some of that roughage that you should have, right? But fact of the matter is, most people don't make it the mainstay of their diets.
Well, and colorectal cancer is interesting because of all the cases of colorectal cancer, about 5%, maybe 10% at most, are genetic, which means if you have a family history, you potentially pass that mutation. But 90 to 95% are sporadic, meaning that you're going to acquire that mutation later on. And processed meats, I think there is some evidence, and it's at 5 to 6%, not a big jump, but we do believe it's there. We'll talk about the types of studies they use to determine that. But it's not the only thing. In fact, it's definitely not the leading thing either. Colorectal cancer is a multifactorial condition. Smoking is probably a much larger contributor to colorectal cancer than processed meat. Alcohol consumption, being inactive or being overweight, and then, like you said, just having a generally poor diet. Fiber is a great one. I think fiber is even a little bit controversial, to be honest. We did uh, previously recommend people to have about 30 grams of fiber because we believed a fiber deficient diet was a precursor to colorectal cancer. But even that, we're starting to back off of a little bit. But gosh, if we could just focus on smoking and alcohol consumption, we'd probably do more than than avoiding bacon ever would.
I've only had one member of my entire extended family ever have colorectal cancer, and he also lived though and worked for many years near Chernobyl, where you have a lot of radiation in the atmosphere still. So obviously that may have had something to do with it, perhaps less than anything he actually ate.
Well, air pollution itself, it's not a direct correlation with your example, but air pollution is believed to cause about 200,000 cases of cancer worldwide. Smoking, on the other hand, is likely to cause 1 million cancer deaths worldwide. Alcohol, as an example, it probably kills, um, or alcohol and cancer together are probably believed to kill over 500,000 people a year. Um, Colon cancer, about 800,000. What percentage of those people are dying of colon cancer because of their bacon consumption? Well, we don't really know because we can't prove a direct link, but there's a correlation. At best, we're thinking maybe 30,000 of those 800,000. That's much less than 1%. I mean, that's much less than 1/100%.
We've got more coming up with Russell Singleton. He's a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls, and of course, he's talking about some of these warnings related to carcinogens and certain processed meats. We've got some of your telephone calls too coming up if you're so inclined. Question or comment. 32 right now, 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Oh, the music there, actually the Peanuts theme, that'll be coming up, of course, in the next few weeks. A lot of people have those little videos they play for their kids of Charlie Brown Christmas. Charlie Brown, by the way, in that show, 50 years old. Now, you can tell that he's been eating well. So I just want to point that out because they'll all still look like kids when you see it on the air. 844. We've got Russell Singleton with us in studio. He's a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. And we're talking about processed meats and warnings about carcinogens. It's 32. You know, Russell, I have a friend I used to work with. He's probably now in his mid to late 60s. And I remember talking with him one time. He was in pretty good shape. He ran every day and, he took pretty good care of himself. And I mentioned, though, the fact that he always seemed to eat eggs every morning with bacon. And he said, I've been doing it all my life. So there you go again. There's someone, but again, the rest of the day he was eating, a pretty balanced diet. And I would imagine that we're talking that word moderation comes back around, doesn't it?
I think you're exactly right. If we were going to try and wrap this up a little bit early, there's still more to talk about, but to fast forward to the end, yeah, I think moderation is exactly what it comes down to. If eating 2 slices of bacon every single day of your life is really only going to raise your absolute risk by 1%, then that's just not a big deal. And I don't think people eat bacon even that much. So if it's really something you enjoy, I don't think you should, or you have to cut it out completely. But I think there is enough evidence to say that this is at least a probability. And so if you eat a ridiculous amount, if you're eating that yard of bacon every day, then maybe you should think about cutting back.
Well, for people who are listening today, I think that they sometimes feel a lot of this is overhyped because the World Health Organization makes a statement. It's what happens after it gets amplified in media, and everything seems like it's going to kill us. Flesh-eating bacteria, MRSA, pit bulls with AIDS. I mean, there's over the last 25, 30 years, every time there's even a mild outbreak of some sort of disease in this country, it's that pressure from the media that makes people think that we're all in serious, serious danger.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and that is something I wanted to highlight too. If you look at the World Health Organization and specifically over the last 30 or 40 years, they've tested almost 1,000 different substances. I mean, everything from cell phones to bacon. Um, and do you want to guess how many of those nearly 1,000 substances were determined to be carcinogenic? All of them, except for one. So there's a lot of things that can give you cancer in this world. You mentioned eggs. I think eggs are an interesting example. We've gone back and forth as to whether or not eggs are healthy, whether or not the cholesterol is bad. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about dietary cholesterol. But as science develops, as we learn new things, we change our way of thinking. The World Health Organization used a number of observational studies to make this determination about processed meat and cancer. So to understand the difference or the utility of an observational study, you have to understand what it is. Basically, what they did was they looked back in time, gathered a bunch of medical records, and then either actively or retrospectively tried to follow these people and draw conclusions at the very end based on shared outcomes. But there are so many variables that you can't control in that situation. The gold standard of medicine is a clinical trial, a randomized controlled trial. And going back to eggs, I think there are many, many examples in medicine of conclusions that were first drawn from observational studies and then completely reversed once we actually did a thorough, double blind, placebo controlled, randomized controlled trial. To use a specific example, hormone replacement. Some years ago, we gave postmenopausal women hormones routinely because observational studies said that they suffered fewer heart attacks. Well, 10, 15 years ago, the government did a large study called the Women's Health Initiative, and that study had to be stopped early because women were dying of heart attack and stroke, and it was determined to be because of the hormones. So now, the way we prescribe hormones is completely different. So the same might be said of bacon and processed meat. Once we actually conduct a randomized controlled trial, things could be different, and things generally do change as we learn more. Eggs are a good example too.
A coffee as well in the last couple of weeks, from what I understand. Here's the thing: when we get the media firestorm around all of this, though, it seems to me that it actually hurts medicine more than it does media, and people. That's a bad thing if people start losing their trust in doctors and medical studies.
Yeah, there were two news outlets in particular that I think probably are the most to blame here. The Guardian, which is a UK publication, their headline basically said uh, meat is as risky as smoking cigarettes, and that is an outright. Well, I don't want to call it an outright lie, but that is just untrue. It is untrue because the World Health Organization classified processed meat and tobacco in the same category, both being carcinogenic. That's all they're saying. They are not saying that processed meats are as carcinogenic as smoking. But looking at these headlines, you'd never know. And I think PBS was another one that came out and pretty much said processed meats are as bad as smoking. And again, completely untrue. That's not a conclusion that you can draw from what the World Health Organization actually said.
And it gets politicized, and because of that, that also uh, hurts trying to get the truth out there.
Yeah, everyone um, who's got a chip on their shoulder is gonna jump in at this point and start pointing fingers and the "I told you so's." But you've got to actually get to the actual source of information. I teach a class in communicable and non-communicable disease to university students, and one thing we always talk about is evidence and the quality of evidence. We talked a little bit about observational studies versus randomized controlled trials. And knowing the difference is important, but also knowing how a journalist can interpret those and misinterpret those is equally important. But I never let my students use a news outlet as a primary source. If they're gonna use a news outlet or an article as a reference, they need to dig a little bit deeper and go to the source. They need to go to the American Heart Association publication that this journalist is quoting, and they need to get their own conclusion. They need to read the study themselves because you do get opinions, you do get biases, and they start to shape the message.
And that part of it too is to actually get into the meat of the study, no pun intended, is to go look at the sources of it versus looking at just the media which has filtered it before you come up with that. You start to develop your own hypothesis.
Absolutely. So going back to what the World Health Organization had published, they said that eating about 50 grams a day is going to raise your risk by 18%. Well, we have to take that with a grain of salt, and we have to understand really how risky is colorectal cancer in the first place, and then we have to factor in the likelihood of us getting it at a higher rate because of processed meats or red meat, and really it's a small jump from 5% to 6%. The interesting thing is that if you if you look at the history of what the World Health Organization has said, this is not news either. I mean, in 2002, they recommended that we start limiting um, red meat and processed meat. I had a conversation with a gastroenterologist recently, and he said something very similar. He was surprised that it took the World Health Organization this long to come out with that. So if you're just reading headlines, yeah, you're going to be misled. This is not new information. It's not information that's really going to change anyone's life unless you're eating a ridiculous amount of bratwurst or bacon every day. And sometimes that gets lost on people.
It's 8:52, and our guest, Russell Singleton, is a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho, located on Fillmore Street across from the main post office. He joins us, or the doctor, or sometimes one of the other folks from the office drops by on Wednesday mornings. We do this every week between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. 33 right now. For people who actually, every week they've been hearing folks from the office come by, if they'd like to actually get in touch with you at the office, how do they go about doing that?
Call us 933-4400 with our two new providers, Jeremy Daly and Crystal King. We're seeing people on a same day basis. I think we were doing that before, but we wanted to make sure that as we grow, we maintain that. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter, hashtag Dr. Tripp, or just stop in. We're happy to chat with you. We usually consult by appointment, but the first step is reaching out.
We want to point out we're talking about carcinogens today, but specifically processed meats. I had a friend I spoke with a couple of months ago, used to work with her about 20 years ago, and didn't realize that she'd gone through not one, but two cancer scares. First breast cancer, and then she had brain cancer. Still doing well. I've been managed to recover, back to work, doing all of those things. And I carried out, you always want to know as a friend what may have caused this. And she just said the response she got from her doctors happened to be, we have so many potential effects and carcinogens in our environment. Who knows? And I think that answer is about as close as you can sometimes get.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are some definite links. Tobacco definitely causes lung cancer. We know that. Um, Excessive exposure to the sun can cause and will cause skin cancer. We know that. But I would be much more worried about those than I would be bacon or ham or whatever causing colorectal cancer. If you smoke a pack a day, you're 26 times more likely to develop lung cancer. I mean, that's huge. That's not just 18% more likely. That's 26 times more likely. If you get even 5 sunburns in your life, or every time you get 5 sunburns, your risk for melanoma doubles. I've probably had 100 sunburns in my life. So I'm going to be a lot more concerned about melanoma than I am about bacon and colorectal cancer. That being said, I think we should say, as primary care practitioners, we still do our best to follow recommendations that are established and that are proven to improve morbidity and mortality, meaning it's going to help people live longer and healthier lives. So when we have people in for their physicals, we're doing a lot of employment physicals right now at the office. We talk about colorectal cancer screening for men and women, typically starting at age 50, and that's a colonoscopy. A lot of people are familiar with that. A lot of people are not interested in that. But even after talking about all this risk for colorectal cancer, I still advocate that our patients get a colonoscopy at age 50. If they've had colorectal cancer in the family, then we're usually having them get that colonoscopy about 10 years prior to the age when their family member developed colon cancer. So it is not something I want to to downplay too much.
We have a caller with us about 2 minutes before we wrap up the program today. And of course, joining us, Russell Singleton, physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine. And you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Hi guys. I was just wondering if if you take care of yourself, if you take your supplements and all that stuff, will that help? Do you think? Take your supplements and all that stuff. Will that help? Do you think?
Well, I think it's a good question. If we're referring to colorectal cancer, I don't think there's any real evidence that a supplement, i.e. a multivitamin, will help prevent colon cancer. Interestingly enough, your daily aspirin has been shown to reduce colon cancer. Now, that being said, I don't even routinely recommend that all my patients take a daily aspirin because it also increases your bleeding risk. And there's some research that shows that a daily aspirin doesn't necessarily change outcomes as far as heart health goes. So I think the larger message is that if you have a concern about what you can do to lower your risk, come talk to us. Talk to your family doctor, to your PA. Come see us at Tripp Family Medicine. Let's talk about screening tests. Let's talk about living a healthy lifestyle. If you smoke, you should stop smoking. If you drink a lot of alcohol, you should limit that. But but to be specific, I don't know that supplements per se are going to change a lot. Certainly, living a healthy lifestyle. We alluded to this earlier. Being physically active, not being overweight, not smoking, not drinking, eating a well balanced diet with eating red meat sparingly. I think that is your best way to eliminate or to reduce the chance that you get colon cancer.
One more time before we wrap up, for people who'd like to reach the office, how do they go about doing that?
Give us a call, 933-4400. We're going to be open all day today, but we will be closed Thursday and Friday for the holidays. So we also want to wish everyone, and all our listeners especially, a very happy and very safe Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we mentioned people are going to devour on average 4,500 calories at the meal tomorrow, but hey, one day a year.
Enjoy it.
We've got news coming up. Want to thank Russell Singleton from Tripp Family Medicine for joining us this morning. 32. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Going to talk about a little Thanksgiving facts and figures in the next hour of the program.